This is for the nerds, this is for the brainiacs, this what we deserve. Go ahead and play it back, you ain't gonna touch me, you not gonna do nothing, you are not above me, I bet you wish you was me, I know it, I know.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Only Friends podcast. Today we are coming to you from a very wet and rainy Las Vegas, Nevada. We had some spotty internet issues, so if you lose us at some point throughout the show, we'll do what we can, but I don't know.
Blame it on the rain.
All right, Milli Vanilli, relax over there. I definitely don't have a lot of faith in Cox. We're joined today by a very special guest, Victoria Livschitz. I hope I got that right. Is it even close?
Pretty close.
Okay.
Pretty close.
All right, pretty close. How would you pronounce it?
Yeah, Livschitz.
In your Montana accent.
Yeah, Livschitz is good.
Okay, good. Before we get into speaking with her, I just want to make a quick announcement. We did sell out the Academy. I guess offering for you guys to play Poker Out Loud did a number in selling those seats. They were just gonzo. So we have new dates to announce. March 20th through the 23rd will be our next Poker Out Loud style Academy. That's here in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you're interested in that, I put the wrong, this is why I need a graphic designer. I put the wrong website up. It's academy.solveforwhy.io, not solveforwhy.io.
Okay.
I'll get that changed, grunt work. I gotta do all the grunt. Landon, you seem like you'd be really good at graphic design, Landon.
Have we had this conversation?
We haven't.
If they do go to solveforwhy.io, in the header, there is an Academy merch link that
That's
they can
right.
just click on.
They can just click on it.
They'll find it. If they want to get there, they'll get there.
That's true. You're right.
They find a way. No, in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do as a career. And what I settled on during like physics class and graphic design or design tech, I would make headers and stuff using Photoshop.
Okay.
Like Twitter banner headers.
Okay, we're getting somewhere.
Stuff like that.
He's had this hidden talent
a lot of memes
the whole time. And
I was in the gaming scene, yeah. So I looked up a bunch of stuff on how to do graphic design and headers, but
would you like to be our meme designer?
most certainly not.
Okay.
You can't make my hobby a profession.
Hey, if you love what you do, is it really work?
When I'm doing it for someone else, it's work.
You're doing it for the greater good of the company. That's basically for yourself.
CMO.
It's not. It's most certainly not.
I don't know. I think we could do this. Victoria, I actually have you to thank. Landon's production within the company over the last few months has basically quadrupled. And I think it's because you kind of sat him down and was like, hey, you own equity in something. Make it bigger and make some money.
I'm delighted to hear that we did have some talks.
Yeah.
Glad to see it had some impact.
Listen, when you speak, he listens. That much I'm very, very certain of. True. As he should. You are very well decorated in the startup industry tech space, so to speak. I found out you're actually the founder and CEO of 11 companies, where I thought it was a mere 4. I didn't mean to slight you such like that. You're currently running and operating 2 while developing a 3rd and just, crushing poker in your spare time, I guess.
Oh, it's work in progress.
Okay.
Learning to crush poker.
Sure. Your results have been fairly good so far. You're strictly tournament, right?
Weekly tournaments. I play cash sometimes, very infrequently these days. Like if MTT goes really bad, I might try to drown my sorrow at the cash table
We've all been
to
there.
win or something. But
Yeah.
other than that, yeah.
That's good. And you're happy with the progress so far?
Well, 2022 was really my first year of studying poker and playing poker seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Until that, I sort of knew how to play, and I would play, low stake cash games from time to time after work to just sort of as a entertainment or relaxation. And I wasn't very much a winning player at 2-5 either. But about a year ago, I just kind of fell in love with the game and decided to take it seriously. It's been a crazy year. I just focused on tournaments and played some of the largest buy-in events around the world. And it's been good.
Did I see correctly you posted your results somewhere?
I did on Twitter. I've summarized last year. I made like 11 or 12 final tables. I won 2 high roller titles. cash maybe 25 times. That's like
Profitable year.
no,
Sounds about right.
That's the rub.
no, not at all.
That's the rub.
But you know what? I don't mind. Let's put it this way. I didn't really expect this first year to be a profitable year. I expected to be a big loser. I lost less than I expected, given that I played 25Ks, 50Ks.
Yep.
This is my first year in poker. I am trying to optimize, like in many cases in other investments, kind of time to money rather than ongoing profitability. I want to learn fast. And so, you have to pay
Yeah, your first year,
you have to pay for
you
it.
jumped right into like the top of the top, the highest stakes and the.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. My very first MTT was a 25K. That's
Wow.
Yeah,
and
mine too.
insane way to get started. But in some ways, I think it's working.
Yeah, for sure.
What made you fall in love with poker as a whole? Like, why did you decide to stay?
So, go back to COVID, all the things that I occupied myself with outside of work, entrepreneurship, I spent, by then I was spending a lot of time in the mountains, like mountains, mountaineering, hiking. That's my huge passion and love. And I was trying to get London, get hooked on that as well. Marginal success, I guess, with that. But in
I
any
like it. I just fucked up my knee.
Mentally, he's there. Physically is a different story.
I'll be there. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, but all that went away during COVID. I was cooped up in the house, like many of us are. I lived with older mom, so like very, very strict quarantine rules for a very long time. So I needed to find something to do, and my guilty pleasure became just watching high stake poker, and that's all I did, and mostly tournament final tables. And I just completely addicted to that. And then when quarantine was over, it was September of last year. No, September 2021. I just had this thought, I haven't had a vacation forever. And then the World Series were starting in October, right? And I'm like, well, what if I took 10 days off and I went to Vegas and I had myself poker vacation? So that's literally how it started. So I did end up arriving at Vegas and looked at the schedule, and like the very first event next day was 25K. And I'm like, okay, here's a plan. I'm going to enter this tournament with the idea that I could actually see all these heroes of mine that I've just been watching, on TV. I can actually see them across the field.
Yeah.
Let me just kind of do that and see what happens. And some magical things happened, so it worked out.
Yeah, I remember the first time that we met was when the Win 3500 was going on.
Yeah.
When you were hanging out with Chewy and Philip.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, hey. I was like, oh, hi. Like, this is Victoria. It's like, oh, okay. Hello.
That is very true.
And now we're here, and then I went on a hike with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, by then, I somehow managed to start playing Poker Goes. I managed to final table with Nick Schulman. I managed to get, I think in that Win main event, I think I took 23rd or something. So yeah, I just started having early successes and obviously got hooked.
So I want to talk a little bit about that kind of onboarding process, especially as somebody who's successful or as successful as you've been at building and growing business and infrastructure. I'm sure a lot of that translates over. How did you go about kind of immersing yourself in the game and fast tracking the learning process, aside from like developing a decent network? Like, obviously, we know that you're close with Chewy and Schulman and all those guys, but
well, it happened a little later. So yeah, how do you go about setting a really impossible task and then giving yourself a shot at succeeding, right? That's kind of a theme, I think. That's the theme with any entrepreneurship. That's the theme with starting any business worth starting. And poker is not dissimilar. I'm probably attacking it the same way I've attacked other kind of epic journeys of the past. Going back to this 25K, it's just interesting how fortunes work. So I got seated at the table. It was an absolutely star-studded table. There was Jason Coonan across me, Stevie Chadwick on my left. The only person I didn't know about at this table was Sam Grafton.
Fish, obviously.
Yeah, he just wasn't in the universe of tables that I've watched, right? But obviously, I mean, Sam is Sam is Sam. So anyways, the banter at the table, the chatting that was going on.
Sam was chatting?
Yeah,
come on,
imagine
stop
that.
it.
Imagine that. Sam was on to something, and he mentioned some chess player of like 100 or 200 years ago. And I perked up because I grew up playing chess. This was my thing. And my first business, going back to the history, was Professional Chess Academy. that's kind of how a lot of things started. So that name wasn't familiar to me. So I've questioned the great Sam Grafton's accuracy on that topic, which perked up interest of everybody else at the table. Wikipedia was brought in, and Sam stood corrected, which also I don't think happens very often.
Agreed.
Chemistry kind of kicked off, and then Sam ended up busting me on a dramatic hand, set over set, turn quads. Anyways, after that, nice investment of $25K. Sam and I developed some of the relationship. We started seeing each other in other tournaments. We started chatting at the breaks. And then a few days later, I caught him up on a break and said, look, I really want to study this seriously. You seem to know everybody. Can you recommend a coach? And he said, well, I'm not half bad.
And then you try to look for someone else.
And
Thanks for the thanks.
and we started working with Sam. So he was actually the first one who got me started.
Okay.
And then later, maybe 6 or 7 months down the road, by then I've got to know Chewy pretty well, and that whole gang. We've kind of made a pact that they'll teach me poker, I'll teach them business, and that's been a lot of fun for everybody.
It's been very fun.
It's funny because I'm sure from your perspective, you think that that's a fair exchange.
It's
but
so
I
not
promise
fair.
you it's so asymmetrical to what they're getting in return.
I don't know about this. I always felt like I won a lottery ticket, and they tell me they feel the same. So I guess it's just win-win.
Well, I think we're all aware of survivorship bias, right? Like it's difficult to be successful in any endeavor and not recognize that a lot of things had to fall in favor for you to actually make it. But
Very much so.
Right, but like that should never come in or stand in the way of like recognizing brilliance and the ability to actually accomplish these things inherently, right? And I don't know you that well, but having had a few conversations with you, I think it's abundantly clear that you're very good at what you do. You're an incredibly intelligent individual, and it's one of those things where certain people I think are always going to succeed in spite of the circumstance. Like maybe you don't end up being an entrepreneur and a startup developer or a VC or anything along those lines, but you might have just ended up being like the most talented something else, whatever kind of hurdles get in your way.
My own career seemed to go in chapters, and I get really excited about something which is radically different from anything I've ever done before. And then that becomes the huge mission and passion. And I've been lucky to get successful in these things and then find some completely different other chapter, like for example mountaineering. I found that very late in life, and that became big obsession, and then poker is yet another one. But I think the way I kind of think about it, the unified theme of poker and life and just generally success and very complicated missions, I mean, variance is out there.
Sure.
Variance is massive. You can't control it, but you can control to a very large extent your success in the fields with massive variance. And I think that's kind of what you're alluding to.
Yeah.
If you're doing the right things, eventually with very high degree of probability, you'll be successful, just like poker players are, despite the fact that on any given tournament they could dust or the next 10 or next 30 with a really bad variance, looking the wrong way.
We talked about, you and I, we talked about your MTTs at the start when you were in tech, about job applications for really highly coveted positions that just kind of ended up working out.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a theme. My theme is, I try to pick goals that are just epic enough that just pursuing them is self-gratifying, and then achieving them is sort of icing on the cake. And it's been working out well.
So before we dig in more into the poker, because I know that you have a new project that is certainly worth highlighting and getting more details on. I kind of want to understand a little bit better about how you got to this point and how you're funding all these big buy-ins.
Oh yeah, sure. Let's go there.
So yeah, like starting kind of from the beginning. I assume you're not actually born and raised in Montana. Safe assumption?
That's probably a pretty safe assumption. I've been there for about 2.5 years.
Okay, when did you come to the States? And I guess let's pick up from there.
Yes. Yeah, well, very basic facts. I was born in Ukraine. I was about 10 years old when my family moved to Lithuania, and so I grew up in Lithuania.
Okay.
I grew up playing a lot of chess on the national team, winning some Lithuanian championships. So chess was kind of a really, really big theme. Chess and mathematics, so were sort of two things that I was really into, kind of my entire life. And then, like really early on, I was 17. I was first year in college. Our curtain started to open up just a little bit, and as chess players, we were allowed to start traveling and playing internationally. Still in the Eastern Bloc, but still at least outside. So there was a bunch of tournaments that were run in Eastern Europe, particularly all the area. Sofia was known to run a lot of them. So I went for a chess tournament. On the first day of the tournament, I met this very cute guy from the Ukrainian team, and on the last day of the tournament, he proposed, and I kind of came back engaged.
Life comes at you fast.
Victoria goes hard.
I'm scared.
I'm telling you, I'm adventurer, right? I mean, those traits were there early. And so before I knew, like, all the like blueprint for life, okay, you go to school, you finish, you go to your PhD, you become a mathematician, you have academic career, all that straight out the window. So I got married very fast. Like 3 months later, it's like, whoops, I think we have a kid on the way. And then Soviet Union fell apart. And, by the time I was 20 in 1991, we had a one-way ticket on Pan Am with a 2-month-old baby and a suitcase of dirty diapers and $500 in a pocket. And we landed in a splendid city of Cleveland to try to build a new life in the States.
We're from Pittsburgh.
Neighbors.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Not so friendly rivals.
Not so friendly neighbors.
Yeah.
The Clevelanders.
That's right.
So how long were you and your family in Cleveland, and what were you doing at the time? Were you just stay-at-home mom, or?
So I stayed-home mom for as long as it took to find a job. It was kind of hard to find jobs in 1991. It was a recession time. I remember driving, knocking on windows with help wanted ads, trying to get any kind of job. Ended up getting a job in dry cleaning, where I was ironing shirts in the back and looking through a little window to make sure that whoever was on the cash register wasn't stealing money. So it was humble beginning to a professional career, but $4 an hour, you can make a living on it. We needed to at the time. But it didn't last very long because literally a few months after that, Plain Dealer, which is a local newspaper in Cleveland area, popular, decided to organize. They kind of heard about me and Leonard, my husband at the time, that we were chess players that just moved to Cleveland. And they got interested in the story, and they said, let's organize simultaneous exhibition for Victoria. Okay, this young 20-year-old, ex-Russian star, coming here. So it was a sunny day in the park. They advertise anybody who wants to come and play simultaneous exhibition, please do so. 27 people showed up. And so I had this epic 6-hour battle, which went pretty well for me. And by the end of this day, Livschitz Chess Academy was born. We pretty much just signed up most of the people who came to play with me as our students, and opened the business, and that was kind of the real start.
You won all the games, correct?
I did not win all the games. I won 23. I lost 3, and I drew 1.
Most of the games.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I have so many follow-ups from that. So a quick aside.
But that's kind of it. And then I got myself 3 more jobs, programming jobs. I went to Case Western Reserve at the time to finish education in computer science. So I worked night jobs, writing backups. I was doing software test engineering, like whatever it took. So yeah.
So at the time, you're a mom, you're a programmer.
Yeah.
You are also running a startup.
That's right.
Where did you find the time for this? This is just in your blood.
I don't know. I mean, at the time, you just do what you have to do. I mean, it's a hardcore survival, so you prioritize survival over everything else.
Yeah.
My peers at the time were just goofing off, as normal college students, but we we needed to do something else. So that's, I think, just self-selective. You just prioritize things that's important, and survival was important.
Do you think part of this is like cultural to where you're born and raised? Because like this level of resiliency, whenever you are clearly a brilliant individual who's willing to go knock on doors and work a minimum wage job to get by, is something that I think you don't necessarily see in nations like the United States where everybody has it pretty cushy.
No, I actually see it very differently. I actually see it as very iconic first-generation immigrant kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think America was very much built on that. That's pretty much the story of every successful immigrant.
Yeah.
Just, I think things change with generations because the first generation have to make it here and make it through. And then, if they're successful and become middle class or upper class, and kids that are born then they often retain a lot of similar habits because they just see their parents struggle.
Yeah.
But by the time you get to the third generation, I think a lot of it just changes dramatically.
There's a phrase that I've heard numerous times that I really like, and I think it applies to kind of the history of the United States. And it says that hard men create good times create soft men create bad times create hard men. And that's kind of
four cycles, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, there might be something to it.
Yeah, it seems like the cyclical nature of just like like shifting from kind of like a survivor mindset to an abundance mindset, and then getting lazy and watching the four walls that you built kind of crumble around you.
Yeah, so maybe from those days I kind of got used to have a very crazy workouts, but I also just love doing stuff. And so I think it became just theme. I would fill every minute of every day to the brim with things that I could do. I had kids who were growing up. I had job. I had things that I was interested in. I remember though that all through my youth, not getting enough sleep was just a perpetual problem.
Mm-hmm.
I was just perpetually sleep deprived. And then something very strange and very weird happened, jumping a little more into the entrepreneurial phase. My claim to fame as an entrepreneur is building a tech company called Grid Dynamics.
Okay.
I know we'll jump into it at some point in time. I might as well do it now,
Let's
and
do
then
it
we
now.
can kind of take it from there. And a precursor to that, after finishing case, I joined the tech, and I joined the tech world right at the time where internet were starting to take off. And I was very much part of that movement. I joined a company called Sun Microsystems, inventor of Java and a lot of modern technologies.
I know Sun very well.
In 1997, and I joined when Java, the language that sort of created the internet, was it's super infancy, and that was the language that I studied when it was in infancy. So I joined Sun as, I think, the first official Java architect. That was just such a cool title to have and such a cool company to join. And then I spent professionally working for Sun, basically about 10 years, building some of the largest internet infrastructures of its time. So I became architect of General Motors, architect of automotive in principle. Then I switched to Wall Street. I built some of the largest real-time trading systems and things of that sort that you could do with new technologies. My clients were companies like Visa, Wells Fargo, Schwab, this emerging new tech infrastructure. I was building a lot of radically new systems, and then my last claim to fame, finishing up my tech phase, if you will. Sun had a bright idea to essentially invent a cloud. The last known fact is that the Sun was the company who built the first commercial cloud offering. I was drafted in the team who built the first cloud. Wow. So I got to build it as a part of a small team, and that was 2004, 2005. And working on that project, I kind of became convinced that that's the next big thing in computing. I was 34 at the time, and I kind of felt that I had enough of the enterprises, and I want to go on my own. And I ended up starting a company called Grid Dynamics in 2006 with the idea of basically being the first cloud engineering company and offering services to anybody, big corporations who wanted to build their own cloud infrastructures, helping to teach them how to do that and do that for them. And the timing was perfect. I started the company, I think I quit my job on August 24th of 2006. And 2 weeks later, I held a check for $500,000 from PayPal, hiring me to go basically help them build their first cloud. And I was like, well, I don't have a bank account. They're like, send me an invoice. I'm like, what's an invoice?
You sound like me. Amazing. There's hope for me after all. There's hope.
And so that's grid. And I could take more questions. I'm sure you'll want to go there
Please.
afterwards.
Yeah,
but
keep going.
back to sleep. So I had 3 kids at the time. So I was 35. I had 3 kids. My youngest was 4. No, Daniel was, maybe he was 6. I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I've never done anything at that scale. And the company was global. And so I had engineering in Eastern Europe. So their waking hours were California time, and I lived in California at the time, between like midnight and 8 a.m. So I had to grow my engineering team and oversee them and teach them everything. So all night long I would work with them. And then days I would spend, selling or holding customers' hand or whatnot. So it was just me and in my kitchen for the first year, and these incredibly bright engineers, in offshore. And it was just no time to sleep. So for the next 6 years, I slept 3 hours a day.
I believe that.
3.5 to be exact. Without Saturdays, without Sundays, without days off, it just became sustainable. And I don't know if anybody has actually ever done anything like that. There is no studies what this kind of level of sleep deprivation really does to somebody. Certainly don't recommend this, but it's just reality. This sort of happened. And I think then it did eventually body adopts in kind of completely unpredictable way. So I think my body did what it had to do, figure out how to survive on such a limited amount of sleep. And I ended up, not doing this anymore. But I think it kind of shifted into, I'll take whatever I can get, but if I can't get it, it's fine.
Yep.
And so today I can function on just very little sleep.
It's a nice adaptation to have.
So it kind of helps with a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice adaptation to have, but I imagine that when it comes to like the recovery mechanisms with the body and everything else, like you'd be a little bit better served health-wise if you were actually getting...
I mean, it's a terrible idea, and
Right.
I certainly would never do this again. And and there is, I'm glad I didn't see the studies that I saw later that what sleep deprivation actually does to you. I mean, it literally creates like holes in your gray matter. So I don't know what currency. I'll have to pay for it, one day. But I mean, what's done is done. I'm not gonna dwell over it.
Sure.
But yeah, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, all that's so like phenomenal to think back. I'm not that much younger than you, so I too was getting Java shoved down my throat in 2000 when I started going to college, studying computer science. It was basically the only language that we were really programming in, a little bit of C++, but they were kind of moving everything into object-oriented as much as possible.
That's right. Yeah.
And when I think of the development of the cloud, I think so much later. And I was not necessarily waiting my feet in that space, but I was in college from 2000 to 2005. We didn't know anything about cloud computing at that point. And, with poker and everything else, we didn't really start using cloud technology until maybe the past 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's pretty remarkable that you were on the forefront of that. What a huge opportunity, and to be able to have the foresight to develop a company that says like, this is it. It's kind of people who are like looking at, things like AI and NFTs and these other new spaces now. We've seen it happen enough, right? With the dot-com bubble and then moving into the advancement of like cloud technology and all this other stuff, we see that it's rapidly moving, and with every single movement in the tech space, there's opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think like, your wherewithal to be able to capitalize on that and take over is worth so much. But you said you left tech. So where did your attention shift to?
So after grid dynamics and kind of the funny side story in it, the reason why it's called grid dynamics is that the previous to cloud generation, there were things called grid computing. And there were, I would say, precursors to clouds, were ability to essentially string together huge sets of computers into a computational grid. That's where the word grid comes from. And the word cloud was coined 30 days after I incorporated. So I incorporated as grid dynamics and then cloud kind of happened 30 days later.
Sure.
If it happened 30 days earlier, it would have been cloud dynamics.
Right.
But such as life. Anyways, that took long time. The company kept growing organically. I was the single founder and CEO for oh gosh, maybe 8 years or so. I think until 2013 or 14, something along those lines. And then kind of also kind of an interesting side story, but somewhat important to other things. Somewhere in that process, family, it wasn't second, to business, but it certainly took the heat.
Yeah.
And as often is the case, at some point in time it became too much, and at some point in time it led to the divorce. And then when we broke up, we kind of split everything in the middle, including the company.
Mm-hmm.
So now we became equal co-owners of the company, thus business partners. Kind of a really
out of one marriage into another.
Exactly, kind of a really interesting twist. Now my ex-husband is an absolutely brilliant man in many ways. Including technology and entrepreneurship. And so at some point in time, I wanted to go do something else. I actually wanted to start another tech company. And I thought that I wasn't the right CEO to oversee the scaling part of the company.
Mm-hmm.
We were already, $25 or $30 million in sales. We were growing fast. I wanted to go do another startup, kind of a spun off of that company. And then Leonard said, well, how about I become the CEO? And that sounded like a great idea. So he became number one. He's done a tremendous job with the company. I ended up starting the new company, but a couple of years down the line, we just decided that we needed to merge efforts. We ended up merging the companies. I came back to Grid, this time as number two. Helped Leonard for several more years. We took the company public in when was it, 2019, I think?
Yeah.
Right before COVID. When did COVID start?
2020.
Yeah,
Okay,
March
then
of-
2020. March of 2020. We have a distinction of being the last pre-COVID NASDAQ IPO.
Oh, wow.
We IPO'd on March 6th. This was Friday. The markets were already going
Yeah,
this, and
Yeah,
we
yeah.
didn't
right.
know if it will take off or not. But we squeaked right by. We IPO'd on March 6th. We celebrated throughout the weekend, and then on Monday,
It crashed.
it just
Yeah.
crashed,
Oh
and
my God.
skies came down. So many such cases in the history of grid dynamics and myself. There is just these larger forces at work
Yeah.
that
yeah.
in some interesting ways interact with your little boat
Yeah.
floating amongst really, really big wave. But we did have a very successful IPO. I stayed on board, helped to get company through COVID, which was super dramatic event on top of that. And then I finally retired completely from that company in December of 2021, moved to Montana, and now I could fully focus on the next three companies.
I was gonna say, you glossed over quite a bit there.
Yeah.
I feel like there's like 6 or 7 companies that we didn't even
There
discuss.
were, exactly, yeah. There were things on the side here and there, but
Just side projects, no big deal.
yeah, but the biggest one is that the company that I'm really, all in on is a company called Right on Track.
Okay.
It's a company in outdoor recreation space. It's married to my, love affair with the mountains, and it aims to revolutionize outdoor recreation.
So I saw this. This is the one that I did a little bit. I wouldn't call research, but I was perusing. Do I have it right that you guys basically offer guided experiences for people who kind of want to enjoy the outdoors?
Yeah, if I give you sort of the punchline and the big vision and a mission is to create kind of Amazon for outdoor recreation.
Okay.
One single digital platform where people can discover things they can go do in outdoors and then procure all the bits and pieces of what they need. Now, that tends to happen away from urban areas into the little trail towns. And so you don't have Amazon Prime, you don't have smart lockers, you don't have any of this infrastructure. So
Right.
we're building that.
Yep.
So basically a full stack to provide digital products and physical goods and services for everything related to outdoor recreation. It's a hopefully one day $1 trillion marketplace.
Very, very coincidental that that's actually the mission. I was just talking to Landon on the ride over here of how I had that same idea for the poker space.
Yeah.
In just creating a one-stop platform that covered entertainment, covered list, schedules, training, utilities, tools, all the things, basically like it's all in one place. I think that's something that these niche industries such as mountaineering or outdoors and, poker alike really lack, where chess nails it. Chess.com nails it. For the most part, anyway. At least I don't know that much about chess, but like...
Poker world is definitely super interesting. I'm very new to it. I'm learning. I have a terrible habit of falling in love with my hobbies, where they stop being hobbies and become obsessions. And it doesn't take very long for me to be obsessed with something and then start company in that space.
Sure.
There is a poker tech company somewhere in the making.
Okay.
Well.
I believe you. I certainly believe you. Where to go to from here? Okay, we're talking poker. Let's bring it full circle. You've also, because you're bored, I guess, took on a new project called Poker Queens, and you are basically creating a community for women who want to get introduced to the game. Kind of follow in your footsteps a little bit, since you're still in your first year. Your trajectory is obviously very different than the average woman who's going to get involved. But
yeah, let's talk about it. I'd love to talk a little bit about this. And the hook is this. So I've been in a male-dominated industries my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Tech is very much male-dominant. Speaking about I started my career in Detroit. Right? Detroit automotive in the 90s.
Yeah,
it's an incredibly male-centric, male-dominant cultures. I have kind of a funny story, if you will, from that time. I was often in my time working for Sun, but focusing on automotive, particularly General Motors. And we're talking late 90s.
okay.
I would be the only woman in a room.
Sure.
I would be, half the age of everybody else. I was, 25, 26, 27. Most of my colleagues were, men in their 40s or 50s, powerful people, directors, vice presidents, what have you. And so Detroit winters are not very different from Montana winters. They're pretty harsh. So you drive to GM Tech Center, you park, you get out, you walk through the snow. You get through security. You get to the meeting room. You have a meeting, and then usually after that, there's another meeting in some other building.
Mm-hmm.
And since GM Tech Center was built, 50s, 60s at the time of Cold War, all the buildings have catacombs, like corridors that connect underground and connect with bomb shelters.
Okay.
And they're very convenient in wintertime because it's just a shortcut from a building to a building.
Yep.
So all my male colleagues would do this. I would have to get out through the security. Go to the car, undig it, drive to the parking lot, go through the security again. Can you guess why? Why I couldn't follow my male colleagues?
No clue.
Anybody has
No
a
logical
guess?
reason anyway.
Yeah.
The entrance to the bomb shelters and the corridors were through the man's bathroom.
Sure, I can see. Without being a huge hindrance.
Anyway, speaking of equality, back to poker. I've seen giant change that happen in Detroit, in tech, in entrepreneurship, in VC's industries. I arrive at poker, and poker is honestly terrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible towards women. I remember there was a chat about this.
Yeah.
Right? You guys had opinion and jump in. I was just starting in poker, and I'm like, yeah, this threat is real.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I now love poker. I want the game to get bigger. When I look at the numbers of 5% participation from women, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The easiest way to grow the game is just get more women to play. But there are some very real impediments to that. So it became a bit of my curiosity over the year, a bit of my pet peeve. And then I got invited. Best things in life, sometimes are completely serendipitous. I sort of had an opportunity kind of fall into my laps. And the story went like this. Before the World Series of Poker, I think it was Creasy Gracie Foxon,
Mm-hmm.
reached out to me and said somebody's trying to put in a little fund to put a few women up for free entrance into a ladies World Series championship. Would you like to participate? I said sure, and I wrote a check for $1,000 for just one seat, right? And after that, I think it was Katie Stone who came also to a few of us and said, women who got the free seat, what if we offer them a 1 hour free coaching? Who wants to put up some time? I said, sure, no problem. And I remember tapping Phil and Chewy, asking them to help as well. So I got assigned to 3 people or something. We had our lessons. And after that, one of them, by the name of Rachel, reached out after the World Series and said, me and 5 more friends, we actually want to learn poker seriously. Can you give us some hints? Can you help us? And I'm like, you know what? It's a good cause. I could spend a little bit of time mentoring you guys if you want to. They said, sure. And we formed the original, just a study group.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, let's do this right. Let's create Discord. Let's set up some channels. You post your hand histories. We're going to analyze it. We're going to have a theory channel. I'm going to start posting some topics there. Let's have a lesson, 90 minutes, once a week on Wednesdays. I'll find time. And that's kind of how it started. And then they told about this to their friends. And then, a week later, there's 8 of us. And a week later, there's 12 of us. And, I checked this morning, there's 50 of us. And it's just starting to take off like a wildfire. And I'm like, let me understand the demographics. Demographics, it will blow your mind. Most of the people are in their late 40s, 50s or more. A lot of them are moms. Many of them are single moms. They're soccer moms. They work full time. They love poker. There are some people who are new. Some people play for 10, 20, 30 years. A lot of times they learn it from their brothers and fathers, but they never had opportunity to do so. Life happens, and it's just not a hobby that, honestly, this is where this inequality starts to crop up.
Yep.
For every time I hear an opinion that says, oh, of course people don't play poker. I mean, they're just not as smart as men. I just, roll out my eyes. The economic opportunities is so freaking unfair. The field is so unleveled. So it's just remarkable to see this massive movements of women who are, towards, later part of their lives, feel like they can actually go pursue hobbies that they really want to do. And they're super serious about this. They're literally driving their kids to soccer, bringing them back, putting them to bed, and then putting multiple hours of study. They play online. They scrape, money that they can have to go play buy-ins of, live events on Saturdays and Sundays of 100, 150 to 50 type of stuff. Many of them dream of retiring and playing poker full time. And I think poker community just doesn't understand how massive that body of people are that are sort of isolated, have no real means to find community, want to study effectively, want access to tools, want access to latest and greatest, feel rush as consumers of technology once they know what to do, really lack mentorship, can't afford to pay, for private tutors. Some do, but most of them don't. So anyways, I am just super excited because what we are creating, it is a study group, it's completely free, it's starting to pop everywhere. We now got Canadian members. I'm expecting Europe to wake up and join, and we'll have to do something with our lesson times and probably go even more virtual than we are right now. But it's been an absolute blast, and I'm just delighted to continue to be a part of it and see where it goes.
Yeah, so I have a lot of follow-ups with this, so bear with me. But so I'm not surprised at the demographic. We've been running the academy now for 6 years. We've had somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 attendees. 15% of our attendees are women, and if I had to ballpark, I would say that the average age is somewhere nearing 40. So that part doesn't surprise me at all. What we've often found in speaking with them whenever they come in and talking with them, they're brilliant women. They're in the tech space, they're in the engineering space, the science space. Like, they have some disposition to the STEM, to the STEM workforce or education, right? So it's no shock that they're kind of cherry picked for something like this, and they overcome those hurdles in order to seek community, to seek this type of stuff. Katie Stone is a very good friend of mine. She's had this passion and mission to try to grow within the game for women as well. And as has Jamie Kerstetter, who you alluded to, I had that conversation with. The challenge that I see is that you're right in the sense that poker stinks at marketing when it comes to this. But everything that you just said that women lack in the barrier of entry to poker, aside from the economic disparity between women and men just generally in this country, we also suck at marketing in general in all of those areas, right? So I hope that you come up with a solution to this, but do you have like ideas for how to help better get women over those barrier of entries?
I have a lot of ideas. It's just a really big mission, and we need help of a lot of people.
Yeah.
Marketing to women better, yes, absolutely. There is a lot of room for improvements there. I think the actual economic disparity needs to be more understood and kind of worked into the pyramid, if you will.
Correct.
And I think just based on what I see in this group, I'm learning a lot. I'm learning from them probably more than they're learning from me. Or again, it's just a very synergetic relationship. Best things in life are like that. It's definitely a petri dish for me to study a lot of things about poker. And one of my biggest realizations, and by the way, it's not just about women, I think it's very universal, is that poker is best studied collectively. It's while it's an antagonistic game, while we're playing with each other, although I would say it's a social too,
Sure.
We are sharing the table, there is a banter, there is a sense of community. Everybody at the end of the day is peer with each other, even when we compete with each other. But when it comes to studying, it's even more important for it to be social. And and I spoke to a lot of top elite players, and the stories are always the same. They were part of the gang.
Correct. Yeah.
Coming up, they learn as a gang, they live as a gang, they survive as a gang, right? They learn from each other. That experience of being part of a gang as you're learning, I think absolutely critical to success, but it doesn't exist in the poker fabrics today.
Right.
There is no platforms that allow you to form peer groups. Now, my story of somebody new to poker, who've had some successes, it's got out there in a little, crumbs here and there. And every time that happened, I would get a lot of notes from people that I've never heard. Now, most of them are men, and they would reach out to me and they would ask me a bunch of questions. They're always very similar questions. Can you share? What do you study? Where do you go? I want to, learn poker. How do this efficiently? Do you have coaches? Can you recommend somebody? And inevitably, is there a study group that I can join? And the answer is, I can't help. I can tell you the tools that I use, but so I think there is just a huge void of the study group type infrastructure. People hang out around, Twitter, but that's for something else.
Right.
So there is big pieces of tech that's missing to just make poker tools much more approachable, much more onboardable, much more understandable. That's a whole other conversation. Poker tech sucks.
Yeah.
One
agreed.
of my biggest shocks getting from Silicon Valley to poker, I would assume poker would be very advanced with respect to tech. I mean, it's into crypto, it's into everything. There's smart geeks, there is a lot of correlation. Poker tech is awful in every possible
It's the worst.
way.
The UI UX is like the worst across the board.
just the worst. Yes. So obviously, I'm itching to build a poker tech company.
Sure.
Yeah. No, it's predestined. But if you look at just where it's lacking in social, lacking in communities. It's universal. It's not special for women. But obviously, women have it worse because they have even less outlets to sort of gang up together, study together, support each other, sweat each other. There's a huge aspect of this group is just moral support. And it is so freaking important. And then at some point in time, you obviously get to conversation about staking, right? I mean, poker is something where, staking is a big part of being successful. And it's really, really hard to come up with a solution for how women become sort of known enough to find themselves, some economic means of being able to participate in the game.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's loaded, but you chip away at it.
You made a you made a lot of really good points there that echo a lot of my beliefs, and I've had these conversations ad nauseum, especially because like I'm close to people who are very passionate about growing this game, and I think the issue is those of us in the position to actually impart some level of change at a community level, we take our eye off the ball so much and get so distracted by these kind of ancillary conversations that they are problems that need to be corrected, but they're not the reason why the growth isn't there. And I'm mostly speaking to a lot of the bullshit narratives that are very misogynistic in nature.
Yeah.
That you hear in commonplace, like women aren't as smart, or they don't have access to as much money, or some of these things may be partially true because of the wage gap.
Second is probably true.
Yeah, exactly. But that they're treated poorly, and like we need to clean up the environment. It's like all of that may have some level of truth to it, but that is certainly not what's preventing somebody from at least stepping in the arena. So it's not like we see 30% of women try poker and only 5% remain. Maybe that is the case, but I don't think so. I think largely it more speaks to the acquisition problem that poker as a whole has.
I am starting to be convinced that, well, first of all, poker is growing, right? It's very exciting to see. It's definitely a growing industry.
At least tournament-wise, yeah.
Well, I looked at some numbers, right? Once I started getting interested in this and entrepreneur, I have to go do some market research. And my first question was, well, what's the global pool of people who play poker? Do you guys want to venture guess how many people in the world play poker one form or another?
I have an idea if we include like play money.
Yeah, include play money.
I think it's somewhere around 100 million.
It's 120.
Okay.
So it's close enough. It's a mind-boggling number. What is the growth rate year over year?
If I had to guess, I would think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 20%.
Yeah, it is.
20%?
Yeah, about 19.
That's a lot.
It's insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
And obviously some of it then spills in all facets of poker, right? So it's a good time to be in poker.
Yeah, like
poker
in my
tech
head-
or anything else like this, right?
Yeah, I would
and
think
you see consumers coming in, and the gaming is on the rise, and just generally this idea as my entertainment is gaming, and poker takes like the intellectual top probably of the world. So that's kind of all good. But same applies to women. It's just as in any tip of the iceberg, there's just so much that is completely invisible because there are barriers that just so thick and so wide. So if we go from like, okay, there's a problem to what's the solution, right? The reason I even reached out to you a couple of days ago and said, hey, can I come to a podcast? Can we talk about this? What makes me excited about this group is that it's something that I think is a now really easy vehicle to get involved and help grow. And it's one of those things, it takes the village.
Right.
Now, the village is growing very fast. Like, we've gone from 5 people to 50, over 6 months. I think we're going to go maybe from 50 to 500, on the accelerated schedule from everything that I've seen. So, and there is a power in numbers.
Yep.
And so, how can anybody get involved? There's so many ways to involve. If you're running a learning site, reach out with us and give our members, free access or discounted to the point where economic opportunity isn't getting in the way. At the end of the day, we actually have a lot of members.
Right.
Now maybe we can make some sort of a group deal, right?
Yep.
That's good for everybody. I started tapping in pros and asking to come in with a guest lecture. I'm certainly both underqualified and overwhelmed with the idea of continue to deliver, weekly 90-minute lesson, to this growing community. So I've got such a great support. We're going to have Chewy, we're going to have Dinax, we're going to have Justin Saliba. We are going to have a number of people who responded and said, yeah, I'm going to come and give you a lecture. One lecture a year, 50 people doing this, basically full calendar of remarkable lectures on a weekly basis. We're going to invest in recording these things and putting it out there for members to be able to watch on their own times, to creating, learning content like that. It's been really cool to watch the administrative side. It's just completely organic. Somebody steps in to run the website, somebody steps in to run the league. Oh, let me tell you about the league. The league is super exciting. We want to motivate people to play. And again, some have economic opportunities to do so, some don't. So we said, okay, let's put one one Wednesday a month, like 3 will be for lessons, but 1 will be for home game. Let's create a tournament for our members. So everybody loves that. We're going to do one next Wednesday is the first one. And then they said, you know what? Let's form a league. And people can win points for placing high in our tournaments. But at the same time, let's recognize open field tournaments. If you play somewhere, you win money, you win points. And a little bit like how Poker Go does this.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, top 3 women in the leaderboard, I'm going to put them in the 1K tournaments of their choosing.
Yeah.
They could play in ladies events or somewhere
Sure.
else. So I said, I'll donate 3K, right? Three places like that. Everybody absolutely loves this. The league is growing leaps and bounds. We already have scoring going and whatnot. There's people who said, okay, I'm going to play lots of tournaments this year.
Right,
This thing
Right.
really have an incredible effect. So if somebody else wants to jump in and offer, staking deals like that, it's not even staking. It's just like donate
free rolls.
$1,000. It's
Yeah.
a free roll for somebody. It's so freaking important. It's super important for people because it gives them chances and gives them opportunity. But above that, if anybody who is in the staking game, take a notice. Maybe you actually can offer staking deals for top 3 or top 5 or top 10, right? Now it becomes more and more interesting. So it's sort of the very concrete vehicle that I think can rally the poker community around to say it's a shared experiment. Let's see how far we can together take it.
You kind of answered a question that I wanted to ask, but I still kind of want to ask it.
Yeah, please.
From a resource standpoint. So first and foremost, I think like what you guys are doing in, kind of acknowledging that there needs to be a cultural shift, but sticking a pin in that and actually addressing the tactical things that can be corrected in order to give people more opportunity. I think that is incredibly important, and the notion of keeping your eye on the ball. The question I was going to ask is, can this scale? And I think the league is a good example of, yes, it can, but like wholeheartedly
Oh
as
yeah,
far as...
I absolutely think it scale. Well, if there is one thing that I learned in my years now, decades of entrepreneurship, knowing how to scale your business or your project or your social movement, it's kind of equivalent of ICM in poker. That's where all the
It's
money
for poor
are.
people?
No, this is where all the money are, right?
Yeah.
Everything else is just the table stakes.
Correct.
You have to have a great product, great vision, great team. Maybe you will mean cash.
Yep.
Where things get really interesting is that can you actually scale? Scale breaks everything if you don't do this right. Scaling something requires completely different set of skills, leadership structures, sort of everything else. So whenever I start a project, if I cannot conceive how it's going to be managed at scale, I'm not going to get started because you ain't going to win the final table.
Right.
What I really love about the way the movement is operating and the way we're doing is it's designed to be infinitely scaled from start. Completely virtual. It runs on a set of scalable tools. The self-governing aspect of it is going to be scalable, for a very, very long time. I could see this having thousands of members. I don't know about 10,000 or hundreds of thousands, but I'm pretty sure if we get to that side, we'll figure out how to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you think that there's some sort of dilution that takes place in the actual learning teaching mechanism as it begins to reach scale?
I don't think so. I remember going back to grid dynamics. When we got started, I really had an incredible brain power working for me. The way I started the company, it's kind of an interesting anecdote. So I'm sitting in my, in my kitchen in California, and I'm literally playing with a globe, right? I had a globe, I'm spinning it, and I'm kind of thinking, where do I want to put my engineering team? And I know I don't want it to be in Silicon Valley, because while you get the best talent, A, it costs enormous money, and
Right.
B, you actually have incredibly low loyalty. Because in the end of the day, any great engineer can get, $500,000 more from Google any day, and like good luck competing. So I'm like, I wanted to find, and the metrics that I set to myself, I said, I want to find the highest number of IQ points per dollar that I can get. And out of curiosity, I go to Google and I type ACM World Champions 2026. ACM is essentially Programming World Championships. And what do you know? A team who won World Championships that year was a university team from this little town called Saratov, Russia. So I asked myself, could they possibly be hireable?
This is my favorite story, by the way. This is one of my favorite stories ever of all time.
So I go find them, and turns out that they are, and I just hire them. That was kind of a start of Grid. So I work with these amazing people, right? And then, they're doing some amazing stuff. They're learning cutting edge technologies. They're building clouds for PayPal. So they're loving it. So they tap their friends. And I remember a year from the start, I go there and we have our first corporate offsite. Dead winter in Russia, Volga River, where Saratov is completely frozen. We're like skiing across the river and talking about business. And there's 18 of us. And one of my key guys says, Victoria, you realize that there is a hard stop to when we will start scaling. We can get to 25 people at the same quality, and after that, everything will plummet. Mm-hmm. And we'll never be the company that can do the hard stuff that we can do, simply because we have to drop our standards. Well,
right.
Grid Dynamics today is, I don't know how many thousands, maybe approaching 10,000 or something. We certainly did not drop any standards. Yeah. And so, I've seen how this goes. I think it actually works the other way. The bigger you are, the more successful you are. Now you have power to actually attract bigger talent.
True.
Do so on a more consistent basis. Start branching and create sub-communities. Start finding moderators who want to come in and start, want to make a difference. Now, I'm very optimistic that this thing can scale and scale and scale. Let's see how far it can go.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to tell you, I see a lot of real world applications here if you do pull this off. Like, why couldn't education as a whole just be crowdsourced this way? And
don't even get me started on
the
theories
I
of
imagine,
how to,
I imagine we have similar
reform
views.
the education.
Yeah, I imagine we have similar views, especially just having been in the quote unquote teaching space for like 6 years. It just seems so inefficient as it is.
Oh, it's one of the most backward things like ever. Yeah. No, I think education needs to be completely re-engineered, re-architected, re-innovated.
It seems like
it's a very hard thing to do.
It seems
I probably share the same passion as you, and I'm very pragmatic in a sense that I just want to roll up when I see something that is just done badly. For all the theories for the greater forces at work, which I enjoy and I have them because I need to know the why. I just want to go solve the problem right here, right now.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting that if you solve the right problem in a small instance and figure out how it scales,
correct,
you really address the both spectrums. Don't go after the scale first.
Right.
You can't. Solve the small problem, which is indicative of the big problem, then figure out how to scale.
Yeah, root cause analysis. I mean, it's no shock you're a computer scientist. This is like 101 for what you have to understand. I personally struggle with this a lot. Like, I take the idea of homelessness or people who are like food insecure, and I think about like how terrible of a problem it is and how ridiculous it is this day and age that we are still living in some sort of capacity where everybody's not taken care of.
The numbers are terrible, right? There's like a sizable percentage of Americans who are like hungry on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, America is like,
it's unfathomable.
As far as like countries with hungry people go, America is like at the bottom of the list.
And yet, even in this country, we have a very legitimate hunger problem.
Yes, absolutely. As somebody who kind of grew up in that economic insecurity where you didn't know where your next meal was coming from, like, I get it. And what I struggle with is you see a homeless person on the corner, and your instinct is to help solve their problem, right? So maybe you want to give them $20. And then you kind of realize that this isn't solving any sort of root cause. This is slapping a Band-Aid on something, and nobody's really better served for this in the near term or the long term. And then whenever you shift your focus then to, okay, well, how do I get to the root cause? How do I solve this more at scale? You just get overwhelmed by the fact that there are children starving and dying in Africa.
That's
and it's like, what are we even supposed to do? So talking with you is so important, and I think it's like so educational, at least from my perspective, because you have done these things in other industries, such as tech, where you're coming into something brand new with cloud sourcing. I can't imagine that was a super solvable problem out of the gate.
No, yeah, definitely. Like, Grid Dynamics was a huge innovator, and we've done several big things that's never been done before. We've done them well, and that's ultimately, it was well timed. That's why it was a success. But I think there is just a repeatable pattern here, which is, to me, I kind of think about it visually as kind of, business plan in a form of a V, if you will. And you kind of start drawing this V at the top by picking up a very specific anecdote that is indicative of just a massively repeatable case. Like, for example, your example with a homeless guy on the corner. You kind of start there and you say, this guy, his name is Will. He's on that particular corner for a reason. Here is his story. And then you say, the reason why Will is interesting is because Will's story is indicative of stories of millions of others like that, right? You kind of recognize that there is a big problem, but the big problem is overwhelming. So now you can focus on Will.
Right.
So what would it take for Will to be, not just fed once, but successfully out of poverty? Now you start kind of dropping down, right? The first axe of the V that comes down is like, how do you solve that particular problem? But solve it on a sustainable basis. Let's say you can come up with a mechanism that's going to, get, Will off the street and give him a sustainable way to stay off the street. So then you start climbing back up and say, well, now how do we scale it to millions of other Wills, right?
Right.
So that's kind of the very, very basic framework, but I think it works just remarkably well.
Yeah.
And I found it to be just very simple, but very pragmatic. So take one instance of the massive, well, we'll start with, okay, problem is worth solving because it's just epic, right? Back to my earlier points, like problems are not epic, probably just not even worth our,
right.
We have short lifetime, long lifetime, depending on your scale, but, epic things kind of worth the trouble. So pick something that is epic, and there's a lot of epic problems. So, but then, not to get overwhelmed, focus on one prototypical example of that in this particular will. Or, this group of 5 women in LA,
right,
who are just like, probably tens of thousands, but you can't do anything about tens of thousands for a while, but you could do something about this 5. Now, figure out the solution that helps here, very specifically, and get it to work. But from the beginning, build in the scaling.
Right.
If we can solve this here, can it be replicated? And if the answer is yes, then start slowly climbing up the second part of the V.
That's where all the infrastructure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't this kind of like the idea from like Plato's Republic, where it's like if you can find goodness in a person, you can then extrapolate that out and like make that into a city? Where like you have to start with like a very simple guideline for what you're trying to solve, and then if you can find that within one, you can then find that within all. Sort of idea.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you connect the dots in a variety of different ways. The thing is that it's kind of like one of these things, like success basically breeds success. You start small, you get your wings.
Right.
And then you learn how to fly, and then wings grow bigger, and just good things happen.
We talked about this. Well, why we talked about this is I asked you a question, and then you gave me a very profound knowledge. Where we talked about the way that success works, and success is a habit and a skill, less so something that happens. And there's a couple different ways that you can go about finding success. So if you can share that for the people that you shared with me, that'd be good.
Are we onto the gardening metaphor or something else?
We're on to the
what are the plants called?
priority plants.
Priority plants.
That was my framework, and I'm very glad to see that London adopted it.
I really, really enjoyed that concept. I think it's a really cool concept.
Yeah. Well, where I was going with this is we were on a hike, and before we went on our hike to coast to coast from St. Bees to Robin Hood's Bay, you made it very clear without actually telling me that I fucked up, guiding me to telling me that I fucked up by making me realize I was not taking it as a... She made me realize I was not taking the project as seriously as I should, especially...
Oh, that was our little hike in Red Rocks, right?
Yes, that was our Red Rock hike where I learned that I was being very selfish and not a team member. So from there, she didn't tell me like you're being selfish. You didn't say that.
Yeah.
You said, look, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but when you decided to go on this thing, there's a lot of things that you have to do to make it happen, because it's not just you. It's a team effort, me, you, Johan, right? So you had to get stuff, you had to get your passport done, and you had to get your training done for the hike, because there's 3 people and it's not just you. And if you want to go fast, you go alone, and if you want to go far, you go with others.
There you go.
And you told me that.
He's a good student.
Good student.
He's a good student.
It's not over. So we talked about the idea of like how to become successful, not just for the trip in itself, but for things that you care about, right? And one way is you find something that you like doing, and then you work on that every day. Like that's like the grinding mechanism, where you kind of know what you have to do, and then you do it every single day. It doesn't have to be the biggest thing on your plate, but you try and you get better every day. And then there's like for the more drastic methods and the things that you want to get done in a short amount of time, like the epic journeys, but then go into longer periods of scale, is like the all-in method of success, where you don't do anything else and you only prioritize that one thing for as long as you possibly can until you get to either the process you want to have to then start grinding it, or you just go until you can't anymore and you use that energy that you have until you burn out.
That's very true. Yeah, you've remembered it and remembered
Yeah,
it well.
I told you I listen to you.
I also told one more thing, and it's really, really important. It's that sometimes you just have to mark your hands. And a lot of time people get so attached to the things that I've done, and they become sort of, toxic assets that hold them back. They're no longer assets anymore. They're actually liability. They were assets once when you started, but now it's something that is actually kind of holding you back, but you're too emotional attached. You think about all the effort and money you've put into it, and you're not letting this go, and it's actually holding you back, because if you put a rest to it, then it opens up all this time and mental capacity and emotional capacity and financial capacity to go actually get engaged in something else. So part of success is also not only starting the things and watering the plants that matter, but when you decided it no longer matters for whatever reason, or it just can't be successful, you just have to mark your hands, right?
Yeah.
So that's another really.
I've been watering a dead
part.
money tree
There
in
you go.
the house for quite some time.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't really seem to produce any leaves.
Exactly. And then sometimes you're just creating big wet pool of crap.
Can you talk about your experience a little bit with developing all these companies with regards to that sunken cost fallacy? Like, have you had to just exit and say, like, look, this is a failure, I need to move on from this project? Yeah,
very much so. After, I'm in a company at number 12, I would have to really count how many women are like that, but absolutely. I have gone on starting companies I felt extremely strong on. I've made massive investments. I thought, I was running into really terrible variants with these things really not taking off because they should. But at some point in time, you just have to realize the reality of it. And the more you deal in reality, the more successful you are going to be. Emotions sometimes get in the way.
Yeah.
So actually the story of Grid Dynamics itself is a really, really, really strange and funny story. So I could tell a little bit, because it illustrates this point. So when I was leaving Sun and I was kind of believing in this future of cloud computing, I really wanted to be on the technology side, on the product side. I wanted to build essentially I didn't want to build the cloud. I wanted to build the tech that would allow people to build clouds. I want to build cloud fabrics. And my idea was that a lot of people who were in the server space, making servers, renting servers, something like that, they would really much rather be cloud operators, but they wouldn't know how. So I can give them soft that can turn the server capacities in data centers into the clouds. And the people who had applications, they will need some sort of a fabric to deploy their applications in the cloud. So I wanted to create tech layer, a platform that just turns capacity into clouds and then make it consumable, right? So I thought, brilliant idea, definitely, there's a market for that. I put together a business plan. I start going up and down Sand Hill Road, which is where all the Silicon Valley VCs are. I get appointments with like all the biggest VC funds, and they just look at me like, or past me. It's just like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, what do you mean what I'm talking about? I mean, that's clear the future, right? So I had no credentials. I had no exits. I was nobody. my word didn't carry any meaning, and the business plan didn't make sense, and I probably didn't know how to package people either.
Yeah.
So that sort of goes nowhere. And I go, okay, well, if nobody's going to give me money, I will just have to self-fund this company. I find engineering team, but now I need to pay them. So the interesting side story is the reason I created consulting company in the first place, to create my own funding mechanism for my product company.
Mm-hmm.
So I created two companies. I created a real company that was called Grid Dynamics, which was supposed to be product company. And I created a second company that I called Grid Dynamics Consulting Services, which is supposed to be a temporary thing that just goes out, offers engineering, brings in revenue that I can spend building the product. Works remarkably well. Without the first year, I got $1 million worth of consulting services revenue, and I spent every single dollar of it building technology.
Yeah.
Next year, I made $2.4 million in consulting revenue, and I spent every single dollar of it building my tech. So now, 2 years later, and by the way, now I don't sleep at all because I run my tech company at night and consulting company at day, right? This is how I get to 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
It's just. Anyways, 2 years later, I have a prototype. It's amazing. It could take fabrics of servers and turn it into a cloud, and then you could take applications, just kind of throw it out there, and it gets deployed and gets charged whatever on-demand consumption it has had. I'm like, okay, so I can finally get funded, and I could put my consulting services to rest and just focus on the thing that I want to do. I take it for a spin on a single road. I get nothing. People look at my prototype, they listen to my speech, and like, what are you talking about? Then SaaS starting to take off, like Salesforce is becoming a thing, like everybody is cloud is SaaS. Like Amazon is already on the market starting to sell cloud as a capacity, but it's the only one. Mm-hmm. I get absolutely nowhere. So at that point in time, I had to face the truth. And the truth is, my consulting services company, it just freaking grows like weed. It doubles every 6 months. There's such a huge demand in the trenches to go build clouds. My customers are Microsoft, eBay, PayPal, Yahoo, Google later became customer. I'm helping all these huge companies build their clouds, and there is unsaleable interest to have more and more. And here I'm spending every dollar of this on building tech that nobody needs. So I kill my tech company, and I rename Grid Dynamics Consulting Services into Grid Dynamics, and never look back, and I become CEO of successful services company. Never intended to do that. That's maybe one example of how you just have to listen to the market, and you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really fantastic story, and one that probably more people in the entrepreneurial space need to hear. As somebody who's an average Shark Tank watcher, I always find it fascinating how people can come in with just nothing but a sinkhole of an idea or product or service or whatever, where it's just abundantly clear the business proposition isn't there, the ability to find ROI and the sales pitch is just bad, but they're so emotionally married to this idea that originated in solving some sort of problem that they really truly thought needed to be solved. Yeah. They can't get past the fact that they're 7 or 8 figures in debt now and unable to just pull the plug, because the scary part is not losing more money, being more in debt, going broke in this process. The scary part is, what do you do the next day once you've killed your baby?
There is that part of it, and people are just scared. People scared of change. I have the name for projects like that. I call it a luggage without wheels or handle.
Yeah. You're just dragging it along.
It's heavy, right? You have it. You don't want to drop it in the middle of the road. It has some of your possessions, but it's just so much effort to just dragging the damn thing. You commit your life to dragging it, right? You're not even using it. So you just have to let go of the luggage without handles.
At what point did you realize that what you wanted to create was not worth anything in the same way that you thought it was?
You got to listen to the market. At some point, it's kind of interesting because as entrepreneurs, part of us is disregard the market voice when we have a distinct vision. And I've been there so many times. most of stuff that I've done, it was incredibly contrarian.
Well, to be innovative, you have to be.
You have to be, and sometimes you just have to have a lot of inner strength to just disregard all the banal wisdom that people throw at you for why that is not the case. But you have incredibly strong conviction that you're right. And that conviction does have to check against some obvious milestones.
Right.
And you have to allow yourself to question that your convictions could still be wrong. And then over time, you either strengthen your conviction or you lessen your conviction. At some point in time, you arrive at the inevitable conclusion that you were wrong. This is where you'll have to let ego go. And you have to just trade in reality and do the right thing.
So this roughly took 2 years?
With that particular company, it took 2 years. Yeah, sometimes it's shorter. I mean, one of the really important principles of Silicon Valley and innovation is called fail fast. And it's actually you build it into your product, you build it into your company. You have a hypothesis. Before you put huge amount of money or effort or time, you need to be able to very quickly validate, is your hypothesis holds true? And if it does, that's what feeds your conviction in the right way. More often than not, you discover that it doesn't work, at least out of the box, at least the way you thought about it. And now you have the next fork in the road, which is either to, the idea that you thought isn't going to work, so kill it, or it's not going to work the way you thought, but you've discovered some insights, so now you can pivot and try to have a different hypothesis, right? And so that's the fun of entrepreneurship. That's the fun of business. It's an incredibly complex game. Yeah. I would say it's much more complex than poker. I just have many more variables. It's got its theory. It's got its definitely risk rewards, but it's very, very rich as far as decision fabrics goes.
I definitely like and enjoy greatly that when it comes to the entrepreneurial type of stuff or things in that like tech in nature, failing is part of the game and it's part of the fun. Where it's like you try really hard and sometimes like you fuck up and that's okay. Like you're supposed to fail because if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough.
Actually, this is kind of why I love poker so much. Poker speaks to me as the best model of the real life that I've ever come across.
I agree. I always say this is like a sandbox for real life.
And so the amount of failure that you learn to accept in poker is probably extreme. I mean, let's be real. If you are dusting 85% of your entrepreneurial opportunities, you're probably not really going to be very successful.
Right.
You can't afford to dust that much.
Yeah.
But the variance is high. You are going to lose some. You are going to win some. And it just teaches you a lot of the mental framework, how to deal with risk reward. But also, like, if you're in the pot, there's just so many metaphors, right, that just work, that help me rationalize this. If you're in a pot you never were supposed to be in, it gets uglier and uglier. You decide if you want to stay and put more money in it, right, or mock and move to another one. Business is very much like that.
Whether you're talking about poker or business, how did you personally go through separating signal from noise?
Well, that's the ultimate mastery, isn't it?
I do.
It's all in the eye of the beholder.
Because, I mean, when
sometimes things that look like noise, like my favorite quote is, goes something like, I might butcher it, but, most people miss opportunities because it's dressed in overalls and like work, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what could be viewed as the noise by others, the insightful eye takes as a signal. Mm-hmm. And that makes all the difference.
And
but the other way is true as well. Is that some data points are truly load carrying, and others is just noise. You got to filter it out.
That I find to be at least from the outside looking in, quite the struggle when you're talking about like real world stuff. In poker, obviously we get conditioned very quickly not to look at results as the signal. But to your point, to a skillful individual who's already deprogrammed being a results-oriented thinker, those results actually do carry some weight if you're able to gather enough data and see. Like I can very quickly determine if somebody is a winning or losing poker player based off of a handful of results of pots.
Exactly.
Right? And I imagine in the business world it's very similar, but how do you listen to the market?
Well, the metaphor, the metaphor that I always have in mind, It's more of a way to kind of conceptualize it rather than answer the question how, because how it always depends. But it's a little bit, okay, you're outside, low light pollution, starry night. You look up and you see billions of stars.
Mm-hmm.
These are your raw data points. I mean, the amount of them is kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
The real trick is you can squint, and some of the stars are more important than others, and you start seeing constellations.
Mm-hmm.
So different eye will pick up different constellations. This is the originality in business. This is the difference between success and failure.
Yeah.
I mean, the numbers are overwhelming. You can apply modern, data sciences, which will actually show you objective trends and whatnot. But where I think the true genius kind of comes in, this is a combination of experience, original insight, intuition, whatever you might want to call it. But it's really, you're looking at these billions of stars, but for some reason you pick the right constellation, and then you say, this is it. Really this is the unicorn that I see out of all of these signals, and I believe in it, and I'm going to go after it.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't this kind of the method of like process-oriented thinking as a whole, where like once you had your idea to start Grid Dynamics and like found what you really enjoyed doing and found a way to like scale it and make it work, you're like, oh, this is how you do it. I'm just going to do this until it works.
Yeah, it's a little bit also, it was interesting, we're hanging out with Chewy yesterday and talking about a bunch of different things, and one of the things that we talked about that I think has a little bit of a reference to what we're talking about now. When you go through a process of growth of the company, and I think personal growth is not similar as well, there's times to be open-minded and there's times to be closed-minded. And when you're in an open-minded state, you basically invite any ideas that could be challenging what you're doing. And it's really important to be able to open to question and open to challenge and open to say, well, I am driving, down this road. Maybe I should be going somewhere
Learning
else.
to drive.
Yeah, there you go. So when you're an open mind, you're sort of continuously open to be challenged and maybe redefined, right? But you can't constantly be in it because you're actually not making progress. You're wandering in that state.
Right.
And sometimes you need to wander, but if all you do is wandering, that is just not a high productivity state. At some point in time, you're wandering, and we had that conversation
We are meanderers.
with you. Yeah, you meander, and that's fine to be meandering. Sometimes it's very important to be meandering and be open-minded, but at the same time, if you meander your whole life, you're probably not going to produce much. Maybe you'll find pot of gold, but rarely it's that easy.
Yeah.
So you got to arrive to some conclusions at the end. And once you've decided you understand why you're doing something, what you're doing, and how you're going to get there, you got to close your mind. And you got to get into a tunnel vision of, I'm going to get there, and I'm just going to execute. And if I am just trying to get somewhere, I am not interested in a massively disruptive thoughts that begins to question why I'm doing it in the first place.
Right.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not even about thoughts.
A little bit of both.
Right? Sometimes it's not even about thoughts. It's about like outside external factors where it's like someone says, hey, you should do this. It's like, well, I have my plan, I have my process. I know what works. And I'm going to do that.
It happens a lot, and I have methods for dealing with it, obviously. But let's say we're trying to launch this product. And all of a sudden, there is some new, variance comes in, like there is a competitor with a similar product. Or there's something happening out there, right, that like matters. So we need to take this in. Or there's a brilliant idea that maybe we could do it later. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I say, okay, I'm going to actually schedule time to think about it. But it's not going to be this morning. It's not going to be tomorrow. We're going to schedule to think about it, next month. Or... I will say, okay, let's start thinking about it and studying it in parallel, but we are not changing these plans. I'm famous to say, and a plan is a plan until it's no longer a plan. Yeah. When we arrive to the conclusion that we have to do something different, we're going to stop and reorient. But until that happens, we just continue to execute.
I think that's like a brilliant explanation of kind of the scientific method in motion, right? It's like you start with this hypothesis, you test it, you question it, you're open to different sort of pushback and feedback that you may have to pivot or go one way or the other. But it's very important to move off of that step and actually get to the analysis part. So like once you've gotten to the analysis part, you come to a conclusion. You say, this is what works, this is what doesn't. Here's all the fat I'm going to trim, and then you go back through and just refine.
Yeah. Well, that's like managing complex systems in its full glory.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, which is life, right?
Yes.
Like, what's more complex of a system than life?
Exactly.
I could keep this conversation rolling forever, but I know that you are itching to get down to PokerGo to play the 15K.
Indeed.
We are all rooting for you.
Thank you.
I really, really want to invite you to come back and do this as many times as you're willing to.
Anytime when this is fun. I have to say, you guys are my guilty pleasure.
Good.
So it's like, we've alluded to the fact that I'm a little bit busy most of the time. 3 businesses, and I am actually legitimately trying to be really good at poker. So I would say put probably more than full-time, worth of work into poker now as well. And I need to hike sometimes and whatnot. So finding like hour and a half to just go listen to you guys
only an
talk
hour
about
on
whatever,
1.5x speed
or whatever. Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, the truth is that I still find ways occasionally to tune in because you're just so much fun.
Good.
Awesome.
I'm glad.
Man, I remember when we were on the hike, we had a conversation about the podcast actually, and I was like, well, it seems like the podcast just might fucking die. And you're like, well, how do we not have that happen? Or if that happens, like, what's the plan after that? And now here we are, episode 201. Welcome.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
You
we
made
did
it
it.
through.
We've made it.
Well,
We
thank you
made
so
it.
much for having me. This was a lot of fun, and thank you for the platform.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. Where can they find more about Pocket Queens?
Oh yeah, well, pocketqueens.poker.
Okay, easy.
Or on Twitter. So just to reiterate, ladies of poker, if you're looking for the community, you're looking for the league, you're looking for opportunity to play more, study more, learn more, join. It's completely free. It's completely virtual. Pocketqueens.poker, submit your application and you're in. And also huge call to action to actually a poker pro community offer to give us free lecture, to poker educational site, offer us content, to people who can step in, tours, right? You donate passes to your events to people all the time. Consider donating some passes to tournaments to us. We're going to make sure that only people who actually win them will qualify and they'll have a shot. It makes huge difference in their lives.
I love it. I love the mission. We can talk a little bit more off air, but like we're happy to contribute any way, shape,
That'd
or
be
form.
great.
That we
Let's
can.
definitely talk about that offline.
Definitely. So pokerqueens.poker. You can
Correct.
fiend more information there.
Pocket Queens.
Pocket Queens. Sorry.
Pocketqueens.poker.
But also buy pokerqueens.poker like, for the
You'll
sake of
find
SEO.
us. You'll find us.
Get the
yes.
redirect
Poker
in there.
Queen
Yes.
was that doc. It was like a docu-series,
I think you're right.
documentary.
I actually
Yeah.
think you're right.
Yep.
That's going to do it for us. Thank you guys so much. Victoria, thank you so much for joining
My
us. It was a
pleasure.
complete pleasure. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. If you have any questions for Victoria regarding business or her path in poker, please leave a comment below.
Twitter, just and you could reach me out on Twitter.
Yeah.
My PM is open. Everybody reaches
Everyone
out
give her a
anyway,
follow.
So whatever. Yes, I'll get to it. As soon as
Very-
I can.
Victoria L_64.
There it is.
Correct.
There it is. We're going to be back tomorrow. We're going to be joined by Haralabos Vulgaris, for those not
Harry Potter.
Yeah, Harry Potter, if you will. He's gonna tell us all about how to create profitable betting models. I hope we're gonna try to get this thing out of the gutter. Thank you guys so much. We're gonna be back noon tomorrow, and then we take off for Florida and the Bahamas. So we're gonna be a podcast on the road.
Yep.
For the next few weeks. We'll see you guys all then.
Peace.